Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Kerbal Space Program mod called Krag's Planet Factory, which is something that I've been very excited to see going, and it does have some pretty steep RAM or system requirements, but if you can run it, you too can actually add, and let me zoom out here, add planets to the Kerbal system here. You can see, in fact, that there are multiple planets, and these are all places that are fun to explore, and quite honestly, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to reach any of these. This is more for advanced players, but it's something that I'm excited about, and I will be posting in the later future here some video guides for actually how to reach each of these entities. So this video is just a brief look at sort of what each planet is if you want an idea of what you're looking at. So let's go ahead and take a quick preview of the new entities that are in there. As you can see, there's some places that are beyond ELO, the first of which is actually one that is aptly named Inaccessible. Is much further out. It actually does share a plane orbit, mostly, for the most part, with Carbon. But let's just go ahead and zoom in. You see the description here. Further survivalists way out in the boonies, all kinds of defense angles, booyah. As we zoom in, you see it is a very small planet with some interesting pockmarks on some sides, the polar regions, just some interesting bands of stuff. But one significant thing that stands out to me is this is only a 15-kilometer wide planet, and it does have a relatively light sphere of influence. It does have a pretty low escape velocity, so while it does take a lot to get out there, once you get out there, it shouldn't be too bad just to turn around and actually make it there. But once again, the devil is in the details. Inaccessible, definitely the easiest of any of the planets to get to that are there. The next one that I want to look at, though, is Ascension. And Ascension is, if you look at this orbit, if you're familiar with looking at other orbital mechanics, it's pretty similar to a comet. And probably the most exciting part for me, other than the fact that it is a skew angle and it is really hard to get, is that it actually looks like a little ice ball. So if that doesn't make you think of there being a comet, and I'm not sure, I do not think there's an ice trail, but I'd love to see that later on, is that it says I could just belch on this tiny little comet and vaporize your entire species. It's a sort of threat, you see. So this is a comet that does fly through here. It is 14 kilometers. It goes really, really, really fast. And while it is denser than the other one, it has an interesting sphere of influence. Landing on comets and asteroids, things that are moving, is the kind of stuff that NASA and other space agencies have been wondering about for a while. But this is going to be a bit of a challenge to get to, partially because its orbit goes out further than anything else in this, and if you want to try and catch up with it somewhere in the orbital sphere, which you can see where the mod creators actually manipulated the orbit so that it doesn't exactly cross Kerbal. But if it were, because it does just kind of duck under there. But if you want to catch it over here, you have to go really, 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 really fast. It may be easier to catch it on the Apoaps, which is a lot of flying. But that is Ascension. The next one is Centaur. Centaur is the thing that most people looking at this mod are excited about because it has an atmosphere height of 200,000. It has very large radius. In fact, it's a lot like Jool, but it does have some interesting features. It has a ton of moons, first off, and more importantly, it has rings. And yes, these rings show up in-game as well. So it's like Jool in a lot of ways. But rings are sweet. That's one thing that a lot of people are like, I want to see planets with rings in there. But there's not just Centaur, which we have the description. Finally, some rings, according to the fish. The name translates into Kerbal as retinas or to stand significant. I doubt it, based on something from Avatar. So there we go. Now there are some additional interesting things here, such as the different moons, and there's all kinds. I love Jool because it does have some moons that will allow for some interesting views. So we have Skeleton, which looks a bit like Duna, at least from the standpoint of it has a giant, much more Olympus Mons style bulge here. But otherwise we have Funny Red Planet, home planet of the legendary Mount Krag ski area, which is right there. Future home of Herring's Wall Memorial and Strip Club, so that's exciting if that's your kind of thing. It does actually have an atmosphere, which surprises me a little bit, but I guess it is kind of being like Duna, and it does sort of circle in there. Another thing is that we have Aaron and Pak. Let's see if we can focus on them. Aaron, which is a moon with its own moon, and one interesting thing about this is that it does have an atmosphere It's a relatively robust atmosphere, but if you go around here, there's a lot of sand on one side, and there's a lot of water on the other. Nice views, great boating if you want to bring a boat this far into space. But yeah, I imagine this planet would have a very nice view, and as well, it has a very interesting moon to get to, which is Pock. Tiny. Look at all those crags. This is just a, looks like, and one thing I guess that the mod creator seems to like doing is having planets that are not, or planetoids that are not uniform. So one side tends to have a lot of different landing features from the other. Like there's a lot of high and low slopes, and these are not insignificant shelves here. And then on the other side, kind of a smooth landing roundabout. But there's Pock, the moon to Aaron. Don't know if the name has any other significance or not. And then we get Ringle, which is the gold standard because it is a gold planet that you can actually land on, and it's actually a landable ringed planet. So I can imagine you can get some fantastic screenshots from there of the ring and the ring, although the sun Kerbal is a lot thinner back here. We do have, I really like the details for this, such as the crater, such as the blast areas, the different etchings on the ground. Just some really nice work in this mod. Like I said before, it does take some significant RAM to bunch this. I'm running with 8 gigabytes of RAM. That seems to be enough, but flying through here could be a different story, but at least it all loads up fine. But Ringle, no atmosphere on the planet, but it is a ringed planet, and it does have a decent sphere of influence, decent escape velocity, and all of that. And then Thud. Thud is significant. From what I've heard people say, Thud is the densest planet that's currently in this with there. So bonus planet, we balled up all the leftover core material, then covered it with a nice powdery crust. Watch your step. And you can see it has a very large sphere of influence. It has a very, oh my god, significant escape velocity. 6,000, so once you get on Thud, you don't leave, apparently. Or good luck with the rescue missions there. Good luck even standing up at this rate, but still interesting areas there. So those are some new planets that are there, but of those 3, I'd say Inaccessible, relatively simple. You just got to do a further out ELO flight, not have to worry about much of a course correction. Ascension's going to be difficult to get to just because it's flying so fast and has such a variable orbit. Centaur is probably a lot like Joule in that if you can hit near it, you can adjust your course. But the thing is that it has a like some of the demi-planets or minor planets or whatever you want to call it, in real life it has a very different sort of orbital axis. So that's probably the biggest challenge in terms of finding a window, but if you can near it, it should be okay. But there is one other planet that's part of the mod, and that is one that is going to be, I would almost say, the hardest to get to of any of these. And it is actually one that is the closest to the sun here. We have Moho, and you see this little ring appear just out of nowhere. One more planet, and that would be Ablate, which, if we can focus on that, 13 kilometers, tiny gravity, tiny escape velocity, minuscule sphere of influence. Left this one in the furnace too long, and if we go here really closely, you can see that its altitude is just, I say only 600 or 6,500 million meters next to Kerbal. When you compare that to Moho, which is at 5 billion or 5.5 billion, that's not insignificant. And you can imagine the sun is really bright on this planet right here, as you can actually see details just from here. But this is one side. Once again, the features here are just an asymmetrical rock floating around here. One side far more pockmarked, far more even than the other. And this is just an interesting, and I say all these are pretty interesting, but what makes this especially hard to get to is that it has practically no sphere of influence. It's one of the tiniest floating objects out there. I think this is comparable to Gilly in terms of landing, maybe even a little more difficult, because of the fact that in order to get to this close in the sun and to circularize your orbit is going to take about 17,000 delta V, and actually to slow down enough to get down here and return to Kerbin may take over 20,000 or 22,000 delta V. So it's going to take way more work to get to this tiny rock floating close to the sun. than some of the things further out. But you know what, that's what I like about this mod, is that it adds some challenges, it adds some new places to go to, and I appreciate that. That's good new places to add. Always important, especially when you hear squads say that they want to add new planets, new stars in the future. It's nice to see that mod creators have done this too. I've heard that Krag's going to release the source code for this soon enough, and when that's the case, maybe we'll see more planet mods, but for now, definitely worth checking out if you have the specs to run it. Otherwise, this is Way to Fail. You'll see more videos on this and other Kerbal Space Program, including guides on how to reach each of these planets, but that's all for now. Take care.